That looks like it's ready to go. So
yes, that should just be a go.
Good.
In fact, I'll send it right now since we're going to be going up.
No, give it a second because I don't want people to get confused.
Okay.
Wait till we're ready to go. You give it a 3, 2, 1, and then send.
I'm sorry, say again.
Why don't you wait until you're actually Hey guys, this is a new thing we're doing. We are live on YouTube and Facebook right now. You know me, I'm Kurt Othmer, and this is a new thing we're doing called Sharing What Works. You can find these episodes at sharingwhatworks.com, and this is the first one of these. And this is actually really just a promo. I asked my dad to sit down with me, and this is just a promo we're doing for what's coming in 1 hour. It is 1 p.m. Pacific time, August 23rd right now, and in 1 hour I'm going to have Connie here from Rock to Recovery. This is an amazing organization. It's a nonprofit, and they use music, getting people playing music in recovery as part of recovery. They have a huge concert tomorrow, August 24th. It's sold out, and this is this huge benefit concert they do every year. There's a whole lot of amazing celebrities, and we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about the Rock to Recovery process, and I just want to introduce you guys to this Sharing What Works show. We're going to be doing more of these and sitting down with interesting, amazing guests. I brought my dad here just to have a quick conversation to get an idea of what these shows are going to be and what we're going to be talking about. And since my interview in 1 hour, so come back in 1 hour and join me because I'm going to be sitting down with Connie. And in the meantime, I wanted to ask my dad a little bit about the work so far in neurofeedback with addictions. And you guys may have seen my interview with Rick Allen, the drummer from Led Zeppelin, who also they do drumming as music therapy. And here the Rock to Recovery folks use the process of making music as well as a therapy, and it's amazing, and Connie's going to be telling us about that in 1 hour. So come back here to Facebook and to YouTube. Post your comments. Tell me what you think about this new Sharing What Works show, and we'll go from there. So Siegfried, tell me a little bit about the work so far with addictions and neurofeedback.
Yeah, well, with respect to neurofeedback, it goes back to the 70s, to the earlier work at the Manager Foundation. And there, the people were not interested in therapeutic applications. They were interested in exploring the dimensions of brain function and enhancing brain function. And so they were some of the pioneers of alpha training.
Manager. So this is the 70s.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that got started in about 1968.
Wow.
And then the alpha training naturally led to theta band training. Mm-hmm. And they eventually got to the point where they realized that alpha is really the stepping stone to the theta dominant state, mm-hmm. and that state is the entry point to transformation.
Now, Manager was doing actually EEG biofeedback. I mean, this is before Barry Sturman, right? We're back in Joe Camilla's time. We're talking about alpha training then?
Alpha training, right. And actually, very importantly in their work, it also involved traditional biofeedback, temperature training, and so forth.
Okay, cool.
So, and that went back to the early parts of the century. Mm-hmm. So they certainly took advantage of temperature training, but then also introduced the new alpha training.
Nice.
And that then
really was new at that point.
Yeah, that led them to the theta band training. Mm-hmm. That was just sort of discovered, and then they realized, wait a minute, the theta experience is the good stuff. Yeah. That's where transformation happens. Yeah. And that went on for a number of years, and it was about in 1977 that there was the first application to addictions. Okay. And that was not at Manager per se, but of course it involved the Manager method. And there were several follow-ons to that, and there were some missteps and so forth, but basically the results were positive. And then some years later, Eugene Peniston showed up there just to undergo the training, and that was quite an experience. He actually didn't like it.
So this is new to me. So I mean, I've told the Peniston story many, many times. His research is amazing. So Peniston actually went to the Manager Clinic and tried neurofeedback there.
Right.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
And the thing is this, he didn't like the experience.
Yeah.
But he was invited to, do it again and, keep with the process.
Yeah.
And it turns out that he had lost a brother to alcoholism. So he had this a very personal connection, and of course he was personally engaged in alcohol treatment at the VA there in Fort Lyon, Colorado.
Yeah.
With not very much success. So here he was at Manager undergoing the training, And it's in one of those deep theta experiences that he actually was internally prompted to undertake this work. And so he went back to the VA and got permission, basically, to use their clients, the clients there, to undertake a study. Otherwise, he was on his own. He paid for the whole thing and whatever.
So he wasn't really that impressed with the work at Menninger, but then he wants to undertake a study at Fort Lyons, Colorado, VA, with veterans mostly, alcoholics?
Yeah, veterans, totally.
Okay.
And yes.
Oh, it's the VA, so yeah, veterans.
Right. And those that were suffering from alcoholism, and of course, this is basically, in this case, a PTSD symptom.
Sure.
So he was looking at this, what's now called dual diagnosis, alcoholism and PTSD.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was his population. Now, I'm not sure what his feeling was about the Menninger work. I think he just didn't personally resonate with it, but it was enough for him to get him interested in doing the work. And the fact is that Menninger itself was not all that interested in therapeutic applications, right? So that came later. Later they worked with prisoners and so forth, but at that time they weren't. So he then took that back to Fort Lyon, got permission of his management to run some studies. And the studies were just stunning. And the skepticism that surrounded the general reaction of the biofeedback community to that work always mystified me, because the results were...
Still mystifies me.
were, if anything, too good to be true, right? And so they didn't believe it because they were too good to be true. Now, I'm an engineer. Of course I believe that, you know. We believe everything that we hear. And, well, we're simply predisposed to believe.
What, engineers or people?
No, engineers.
Oh, yes.
Predisposed to believe what other engineers and so forth are telling them, because why would they?
Why would you lie?
Yeah.
No.
Whereas therapists are much more skeptical about what
medicine in general. I mean, healthcare in general. Right? We have this whole placebo issue. We have this whole complicated thing of like who's telling me what and which is true and where is and what.
So there's an embarrassment of riches here. All the data came out better than you would expect. Right. And so people just said, "Yikes!"
Because things that are too good to be true are probably not true.
Right, and so his results were rejected by the.
This is okay. So for those of you who don't know, this is the Peniston Study that is so formative in our field. This guy, 10 experimentals, 10 controls, Fort Lyons, Colorado. He had a minimum of 4 prior hospitalizations to get into this study. Minimum of 4 prior hospitalizations for alcoholism to get into this study. And what he got was an average of 5.4 prior hospitalizations to get into this study. And the results were extraordinary. These folks, essentially, too good to be true, as Siegfried said. You had all of the experimentals. These were the folks who got the neurofeedback, some extra temperature training and stuff like that, the stuff he got from the Menninger clinic. So they had some extra stuff that they did in there, but basically alpha biofeedback. All of those experimentals that got the alpha and got the biofeedback, all of them stayed sober. And then all of the control group, and again, mind you, these were people with a minimum of 4 prior hospitalizations for alcoholism. All of those folks relapsed. All of them were hospitalized again for alcoholism. So 10 experimentals, 10 controls, 100% success, 100%, shall we call that a failure or a relapse? And so this is extraordinary data, and that was too good to be true.
It was rejected. Yeah. So
because how could that be true? This is amazing. You must have just drawn with crayon and made up your data.
Well, let me give you a couple more details. First of all, the relapse of the controls took place within 18 months. Every one of them within 18 months.
Wow.
And they were back in treatment.
I didn't have that data point.
The experimentals, at the end of the program, 8 of them basically were clean, staying clean. Two people who graduated out of the program had never bought into it, and they basically, as soon as they were free to do so, they both went off to the bar. And it turns out they couldn't tolerate alcohol anymore. And
okay, so this is amazing. This is sort of a more complicated piece of the story. I mean that it's like, because anybody in addiction work is like, wait. They drank again? The people in the experimental group touched alcohol. So what you have to appreciate for a moment is that these are folks with a minimum of 4 prior hospitalizations for alcoholism. This isn't like, alcohol, I may have a couple extra too many drinks. No. This is a minimum of 4 prior hospitalizations for alcoholism. These folks, 2 of them in the experimental group who did the neurofeedback, were able to go back and have a drink without falling off the wagon, without being rehospitalized.
Oh.
So that's huge. So it's not just like, well, I told my therapist that I was, I didn't fall off the wagon, but really it was a secret. No, you guys, there was follow-up on this. There was a 10-year follow-up on this.
And more.
And more, right? Because this was the 80s or the 70s?
But actually, you're stepping on my story.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Because those 2...
Father-son.
Yeah. Those 2 couldn't tolerate alcohol.
Yeah.
They became victims of what Peniston later called, what we started calling the Peniston flu.
Yeah.
He called it the bone-sick flu.
Okay.
And partly what may have set the stage for that is that in his visualizations, he basically told people that they would lose tolerance for alcohol.
Okay, so what's different today versus back then is this is a lot of alpha work. This is sort of deep state stuff. One might argue there's sort of a degree of suggestibility there.
Oh, yes.
So these people were sort of suggested that they're, okay.
So psychologists can get away with this. He told them, says, don't you be drinking now because I'll be able to tell on this EEG that it's also not true. But as I say, psychologists can get away with this stuff. And police.
And police?
Yeah.
They're allowed to lie too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's one out of the 10 actually went back to social drinking.
Yeah.
And
okay, so I had my story slightly wrong. It was 1 out of the 10.
1 out of the 10. These 2 actually perforce became abstinent.
Right, because they were like, oh my God, this is horrible. This is I can't drink. I can't tolerate.
Yeah.
Okay. So the difference today is it is true that sometimes we shift people's desire for alcohol, even just a normal functioning person does today's kind of neurofeedback. We still can shift their desire in alcohol, but it's not like they go have a drink and they get sick. There's more of a suggestibility side to that back in Eugene Peniston's day.
Yeah. And then there were several follow-ups that were now... the first study was labeled an alcoholism study. And then one of the criticisms he got was, Dr. Penniston, you haven't really demonstrated a cure for alcoholism. You've demonstrated a remedy for PTSD. And he thought about that and says, I'll accept that criticism.
I like your criticism, yes. Right. We're solving PTSD, not alcoholism.
Right. So his next study had PTSD in the title, and it was the same audience, of course.
Yeah.
The same group of folks. And then there was a third iteration where he brought in 4-channel neurofeedback, the 4-channel alpha trainer that came from American Biotech. And that essentially gave equivalent results. You had follow-up on all of them, and all of the results were good. And what happened was this was thoroughly rejected when it went up the chain at the VA. And of course, the Peniston story remained an ongoing threat because other clinicians, started doing the work and so forth, and word spread about how good this is. And so increasingly the VA felt embarrassed, but nevertheless they stood by their position that, this can't be any good. Because it's hard to admit that you're wrong. What happened to Peniston? Peniston was put in dry dock. He was sent to Lubbock, Texas, and essentially given a desk job.
Yeah, but that happens to people in neurofeedback, right? It's like, we don't like what you're saying, so go do something else.
Right, and then he died before really having a sense of the success that he had launched. And the manager people, interestingly, they knew this was their work, this was their technique, but they never objected to this being called the Peniston Protocol. At least I never heard them raise any objections. It was clearly their work. And now the other thing is that the biofeedback community reacted also viscerally against this, even though biofeedback was involved. The temperature training was a big component of this. And that is because there'd been some research that called alpha training into question, and so they were spooked by it, and so now here, all of a sudden, here's Eugene Penniston.
How? What was questionable about the alpha work?
Well, it was, okay.
I mean, other than the fact that the Beatles were doing it and people were sort of seeking altered states of consciousness, is that kind of what you're referring to? Or?
Well, that was the general skepticism within the psychology community. But there had been some specific neurofeedback experiments done in academia that had not panned out.
Okay.
And again, it was a misunderstanding. One of them was doing training for anxiety. And it was doing a balanced protocol where you do alpha up training, and the other group, the control group, gets alpha down training. And they both improved in terms of anxiety. Well, then it can't be the neurofeedback, right? Wrong. Because we're training a control system.
Right.
And biofeedback people often train up and down and whatever, because the interest is in control, not in having walking around with a higher alpha amplitude.
Right.
So we're training a control system, and this was just
But
simply...
just like you get off a treadmill at a gym, the goal is not to walk around with a higher heart rate either, right?
Right.
You run on the treadmill to get a healthier body, not to have a higher heart rate all the time.
Right. But in any case, this became embedded in people's minds as a treatment failure.
Yeah.
As a failure of alpha training,
Yeah.
and so alpha training was kind of became untouchable. There was another experiment along the same lines, but we don't, we can talk about that if you like. But let me go on with the story of the neurofeedback. When we came, what's the time frame here?
Yeah.
His first publication was 1989. His first presentation to the biofeedback community was in 1990.
Yeah.
And then the next publication was 91. There was another one in 93 and 95. And then it was a book chapter. And that was basically the story. Basically, Penniston had been made unwelcome in the biofeedback community. Actually, it's another little scandal that I just want to say a word about. This happened in 1992 in Colorado Springs, where people had gathered to talk about their experiences with alpha theta training, because now there was a number of clinicians who were ready to talk about this. And at the same time, the field, the powers that be, had recovered from the assault of Peniston's initial presentation.
Right.
Now they were lurking in the weeds for him.
Okay.
They knew what was coming, and they were prepared.
Okay.
Well, actually, this incipient campaign against Eugene Penniston, the secret was out. So Len Oakes was the moderator.
This is Len Oakes from Len's Neurofeedback and low energy neurofeedback system. So he's well known around the field.
So he got wind of what was afoot, and so he said, okay, we're gonna get back at these people, and so he arranged for the symposium to be divided into two parts. A first segment where people just talked about their methods. And then a second segment where, after a little break and questions and whatever, then you go into the results. Well, of course, the critics were so poised to pounce that they couldn't wait for the results to be presented, right? When it came to questions on the methods, they already came out with their criticisms.
Right.
And Len Oakes then, with just great equanimity, said, gentlemen, the results haven't even been presented yet, right? And he embarrassed them into silence. And
that was still possible.
Now, the spear carrier here was Barry Sturman, and that's another wild story, because Barry Sturman used to, did all his work at the Sepulveda Veterans Administration Hospital.
Formative figure in the neurofeedback field.
Well, guess who else was there? It was Barbara Brown.
Okay.
Who was pushing. She was actually was also the discoverer, quite independently of Joe Camilla, discoverer of alpha training.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right?
So,
And so they were cohabiting there at the Sepulveda VA.
Barbara Brown and Barry Sturman.
Yes, who would have nothing to do with each other, right? And so,
so much drama.
Barry Sturman really just wanted her wiped off the face of the earth. and now here was this alpha training, and he was just gunning for it. And so he got up and just ripped Eugene Peniston up one side and down the other. It says, well, you don't even know what alpha is. You don't know how to measure it. And you're not putting the electrodes in the right place. And so it was just everything. It was this barrage. And it was Pat Norris from the Menninger Group who just couldn't take it anymore. She just got up and said, Barry, this is just too much. And then Barry sat down, and that basically deflated the balloon. The results were presented, and they were just stunning. And there was, again, one presentation, the name will occur to me, hopefully. A person said that I'm working with juvenile offenders.
Yeah.
I've been working in that field for 17 years.
Yeah.
Very few people last for 17 years doing this kind of work.
Yeah.
Right? And he said, I tell you, this is different.
Yeah.
This is adding something that we simply have not had before, right? He was literally pleading with the audience to pay attention, right? It was plaintive. It was heartfelt.
Well, this is the battle you guys have fought for, 35 years, since 1985 when you came into the field, and you guys have fought for what is often just a completely irrelevant battle. It's just a battle for the sake of a battle that, someone else is saying something that is somehow stealing my pedestal.
Yeah.
And so it's no longer about, hey, maybe what he's saying is interesting. I mean, this quote you just gave me of they attacked him before he had even presented the data, right? Before he'd even presented the results, they attacked him. And that is very much the experience that we've had during our tenure in this field. But it's also the experience I watch other therapists have and other researchers and professionals who want to present, and they get attacked before they've even said anything. It's like, wait, you're talking, stop that.
Yeah,
right?
you're not entitled even to the stage.
Right.
Yeah. The person I'm talking about was Tom Allen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so the story goes on. This was 92. By 94, we're doing it. We've got our own alpha theta system.
We're teaching training classes and
then arranged to do the study at Cry Help, which is an addiction treatment center here, well established, well funded, but a beautiful $6 million building that was donated to them by a grateful graduate.
Important mandated folks for a live-in drug facility and.
Yeah. So they undertook this study. It's the largest study done to date on neurofeedback, largest control study, and 3-year follow-up, multiple measures, and again, totally positive.
Yeah, huge outcomes.
Now, what we did there was to
ask me in the comments. I will link you to the study on our eginfo.com. You go to the research section. You can find the Cry Help study there, but I can also link that below in the comments here if you ask me. And so we're live right now. So we're talking to you guys right now. We're going to be doing now only 30 minutes away because we've talked that long. Now only 30 minutes away, I'm going to have Connie from Rock to Recovery. She's going to be sitting right here, and she's going to be talking to me. Okay. And we are going to be I'll let you do more. But I just want to tell people why we're sitting here talking. And we're mostly testing the live stream and testing the cameras and testing that everything works, but also giving you guys a little bit of the history of addiction work in the neurofeedback field. And so in 30 minutes from now, right here on this, whether you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, right here, wherever you're watching, we're going to be back in 30 minutes. So right at 2 p.m. And everything coming together in the universe as we expect. We'll be here right at 2 p.m. With Connie talking about Rock to Recovery. But go ahead and finish your thought.
Well, what we did with the Cry Help study is that we inserted the SMR beta EEG training instead of Penniston's temperature training component.
Yeah.
And of course,
So this is big, right? So the alpha training was in Eugene Peniston's work.
Yeah.
And so then you guys kind of swapped out the hand temperature stuff with the new, Barry Sturman's new stuff, our new stuff, the SMR beta stuff that you guys were really championing around the world and are still to this day responsible for the success of SMR beta and that, 12 to 15, 15 to 18 work that is so prevalent even today. You guys are a big reason why that's so well known. And so that then became the thing that you guys wanted to try and cry help.
Right. Now, this means we added something, but it also means we lost something. And because we did not do temperature training ourselves, we didn't know what we were losing.
Fair enough.
We only knew what we were gaining.
Yeah.
And so, in the spirit of the time, this is mid-90s, we're good cognitive neuroscientists and so forth, and we're basically bringing the skills of the left hemisphere, honing the skills of the left hemisphere with our SMR beta training to basically enhance the person's self-regulatory competence so that he could manage his addiction, right?
Yeah.
What the temperature training accomplished was autonomic regulation, probably to a greater degree than we were doing with the EEG, which was basically focusing on the left hemisphere.
At that day, but
On
okay.
that day, yeah. Okay, so what was the result? The result was stunning in terms of abstinence and sobriety maintenance.
Yeah.
But when it came to the 3-year follow-up, in fact, just basically the results were 3 times better
Right.
for the
It's
control.
about 33%, 34%.
20 actually referred back to the beginning of the study.
Okay.
Right, when the groups are matched.
Okay.
It's a factor of 3, so it's
Okay.
25% roughly versus 75%.
Okay.
Right. Okay, success. Now go to the 3-year point. They find who they can find and check them out, and they find that indeed the experimentals are holding their ground.
Yeah.
And the controls have further attritioned.
So just a little more of the lay of the land here. So 121 subjects divided into 2 groups. One group had neurofeedback and the 12-step. And so the experimental had both neurofeedback and the 12-step program. And the control group just had the 12-step with some extra one-on-one time with a therapist to counterbalance the time that they were getting with the one-on-one time they were getting with the neurofeedback therapist. So it was a well-designed, randomized assignment and 3 times the success for the neurofeedback group. I mean, the results are just extraordinary, but again, too good to be true, right?
Right. And then blinded testing, right? So there were some
Piss tests
various
and-
testing
Roll
that
up
was all
site.
done blind. Okay. So here we are at the 3-year point, and what do we find? We find that the experimentals are holding their ground with sobriety and abstinence, but then they were asked as to what do you attribute your success?
Oh, God. Okay, so but this part of the story is so complicated, and we're going to end on this. But this part of the story is so complicated, right? Because you can't just chime in with that, because it's crucial. You know. So so they're asked to what do you attribute their success, and none of them attributed it to the neurofeedback, right? But that's a complicated point because, a lot of people jump to the conclusion, oh, well, that they didn't realize the neurofeedback helped them. And it's like, yes, but the data bears it out that the neurofeedback helped them, right? The statistics bear it out. What's crucial is that they didn't purposefully they didn't attribute it to the neurofeedback because their internal stabilization had changed.
Right. And the thing is that the neurofeedback is so egosyntonic that they were not themselves aware that they were changing in a positive direction because they were still me.
Yeah.
And besides, it's not like the neurofeedback is something other. They did it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not you don't give credit to the neurofeedback because I did it. So you don't give credit to the instrument.
Right.
Okay. But our lesson was that whereas we'd succeeded in maintaining sobriety and abstinence, there was still craving among a number of them.
Right, sure.
And we had not solved the problem of craving. And so in that sense, we had not achieved full recovery. In their heart of hearts, they'd rather be drinking, some of them. Okay. And they'd found substitute drugs. A lot of them were smoking and drinking soft drinks with
caffeine.
aspartate.
Aspartate. Okay.
Yeah, and so that has its own dependency. So now let's go to the modern world where we're doing infralow neurofeedback.
Yeah.
That takes care of both the cognitive function domain and the autonomic regulation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now we have the part that much more systematically achieves relief from craving.
Yeah, yeah. Right, you have the case of the heroin addict today, in recent years, in the modern way of neurofeedback, where in our modern infralow training and with the way we work today, you have the case of a heroin addict recovering without a 12-step program. Now, we don't recommend working that way, but here you have a case of heroin addiction recovery without a 12-step program, and that's not what we would have expected back then. So the work is so much stronger, and you get more of that self-regulation piece that I guess you're proposing would have been accomplished with some hand temperature training, where today...
yeah, and of course the ILF, infralow frequency neurofeedback, is much stronger than the temperature training. It gets at more of the... autonomic dysregulation, but it pokes in the same direction.
Right, it pokes in the same direction, exactly.
Yeah.
So you're getting that stabilization.
So that's really now the next frontier is just doing this work with the addict population.
Okay, so our next guest just arrived. So I need to wrap it there because I have to go say hi. So 25 minutes, I will be sitting right here with Connie, and we are going to be talking about Rock to Recovery. And so this is my new show we used to have, so a year ago, before my son was born, you guys had the Coffee with Kurt, and now I'm bringing a show back live. It's going to be called Sharing What Works. I think I actually might have accidentally called it Stranger at Home because the lovely people from the documentary Stranger at Home are here, and they're helping us produce all of this, and they are doing an amazing documentary, and I think I accidentally called my show Stranger at Home. If I did, then, it's just a promo for them. So lovely people helping us out with this. And so my show is going to be Sharing What Works. It's sharingwhatworks.com. Come back here in 25 minutes, 2 p.m. Pacific time, and I'm going to be sitting down with Connie from Rock to Recovery. Thank you, Dr. Siegfried Othmer, for sitting down with me and sharing some of the history of neurofeedback and addiction work. Thank you so much.